Infernals everywhere. That plus we got curses back. Fuck yeah. Feeling like a warlock again. Couple that with a decent amount of talent buffs, and you might be looking at a much more versatile spec come Shadowlands. Of course, the changes keep on coming, so it's likely we will have more number tweaks until the game will be live. But you can definitely get a glimpse as to how destruction will look in 9.0. And speaking of looking, look at our stream with your eyes. Yeah, we actually stream 5 days a week, both BFA and Alpha, and do dungeons and raids on multiple classes. Maybe something you will be interested in. Twitch.tv/MarcelianOnline is the place to be, where you can see how to pee rhymes. The biggest thing that will hit you in the face is the 6-second cast time on your summoned demons, because some people just want to see the world burn. The devs gave an argument for this change, in that it prevents locks from pet swapping often, and really, this makes sense in PvP, but not in PvE. Pet swapping should be a skilled choice to make in certain situations, which was always difficult to find a place for in the rotation provided by BFA, and now it's completely dead. I'd rather have a small cooldown on pet summons, but instead you get Fell Domination, so yay? It's definitely good, but with a 3-minute cooldown you can still run into the issue of pet bugging or dying randomly during boss fights. Have this at maybe 1 minute and I'm Gucci. Otherwise, for the love of God, Blizz, it's been 15 years, can you fix the pet AI? If mobs can find pathing to reach their targets, why cannot pets? I'm not a game designer, maybe that's the issue. Curses are back. They have been changed slightly over the course of the alpha, and right now we have 4 of them. Curse of Exhaustion reduces the target's movement speed by 50% for 8 seconds. The slow is very welcome, and there are definitely uses for it, especially now that the AoE cap has been reduced, which as a consequence should reduce the number of targets we fight normally. Hence, individual CC spells become a bit more valuable. Good for kiting. Curse of Tongues lasts for 30 seconds and increases cast time by 30%. This works decent on caster mobs in dungeons, especially now where there seem to be more mobs that cast filler spells. And to go hand in hand with this, you have Curse of Weakness that lasts for 2 minutes and increases the time between attacks by 20%, which is a fancy way of saying reduce attack speed of targets. Same reasoning and applications for this one as the Curse of Tongues. Lastly, Curse of Recklessness lasts for 2 minutes also, increases the target's physical damage dealt by 10%, but increases physical damage taken by 5%. At first glance, you want this on caster mobs that do few to no physical attacks to offset the negative part of this one, you know, the extra damage. It also prevents enemies from running away in fear, which is, well, Clearly, all of these are fantastic in PvP and overall adds more utility to a class struggling to keep up with the Swiss Army knives. That's Havoc Demon Hunters for the uninitiated. Ugh. Havoc. Ugh. The target can only have 1 curse on it, but you can have multiple curses out if there are multiple valid targets that can be affected. And speaking of utility, Demonic Circle is now baseline as well, and this is a decent change to the mobility or lack thereof that warlocks have been struggling with. Not much to say here. There was always a choice you made on the row, thinking you could use the mobility, but Mortal Coil was usually taken, or Dark Fury. Now it's baseline, so yay! To complete the feel of Warlock, Corruption is also baseline for destruction. This is a debatable good unprune. It has a cast time, which brings us back to the old school Warlock where non-afflictions had to cast it or talented to be instant. It's an extra dot, has okayish damage, but it's almost useless in a world where you constantly need to build soul shards. It could have very specific applications, but it definitely doesn't look like something that will be a part of your basic rotation. Apart from this, there are a bunch of spells, rank 2 spells to be exact, that buff the already existing ones. Rank 2 is essentially an empowered version of a specific ability. For instance, Havoc will now get 2 extra seconds bringing it up to 12 instead of the BFA 10. The benefits of this are clear and obvious. Cleave is the name of the game. Rain of Fire as well gets 30% additional damage at level 56, which at the end of the day, does it really matter how these spells get their overall strength? What matters is how they function at max level, and at max level they deal more damage. Same with Infernal. The initial impact will deal more damage, and this will matter once we get into the talents. Overall numbers are relative since we're getting squished and stuff, but the scaling does matter, and most spells have had their scaling buffed, specifically spells like Rain of Fire, which was underperforming for the last 2 years. And now we are going into the juicy bits. The Venthyr will give you Impending Catastrophe, a 2-second cast on a 1-minute cooldown. Probably one of the best animations in the game. This baby launches a big-ass ball of doom to your target, hitting everything in its path, applying a 12-second dot to all of them, and putting a Curse of Weakness or Curse of Tongues on the target's hit. The dot is fairly strong, and being able to apply AoE curses with one cast is pretty cool. The issue is the curses themselves. They are placed seemingly at random, which borders on useless. Mobs have different attack patterns. Some cast 1 or 2 spells, then melee their targets. Some cast back-to-back spells, and some are just melee. If the curses will be random, you can pray that tongues will be on casters and weakness on targets that melee. But that's not always the case, so you either reapply the curses, which takes time and just it is, and likely won't happen anyway, or simply think of this as a ball of dots that could put useful curses on enemies. The Night Fae comes with Soul Rot. This is probably the funnest one to use so far, but likely the least useful for destruction, unless the damage is just stupid, in which case it will be OP. What this does is applies a dot on a main target and 3 other enemies near it, and they all will be effective for 8 seconds. Casting it takes away 20% of your HP, but when you drain life, you drain it from all of your affected targets. This has to be the coolest Warlock spell ever. Remember Gul'dan in the Warcraft movie? It's fucking that. You could definitely see uses of this in dungeons, and with decent haste, you'll be able to fit in almost 2 full drain life casts in its window. Not sure if this is supposed to be worth it more for Affliction, but even so, drain life in AoE is one of the Warlock dreams. Am I right? No, I'm right. As a reference, my 20k HP Warlock can drain life and heal for 3k with 1 cast baseline. So up to 12k with max effect from this, Covenant ability per cast, and it costing 4k of my HP is hardly relevant at this point, to anybody that was wondering. Decimating Bolt from the Necrolord seemed to be the quintessential destruction ability, in that it's fucking big and it hits hard. What else do you want out of your Destro? It's on a 45-second cooldown, but also on a decently large cast time. It will increase the damage of your next Incinerate by 200%. Outside of this, the overall damage and buff increases the lower your target's HP is, making it into a pseudo-execute-like ability. The damage numbers are relative, since you have to factor in the soul shards you are not generating by not casting Incinerates instead. That can only be really simmed to figure out how good it is, and most likely the value of this covenant will be stronger in raids and general boss fights with a longer or more dangerous execute phase than normal. But since we cannot just change covenants on a whim, it won't be an issue of what does this fight require of me, but more of a what strengths do I want to have. Lastly, all of the previous arguments will probably go out the window since the Kyrians are coming with some OP shit. Scouring Tithe has maybe the most boring animations and feel. It's a castable dot that does mediocre damage, and if the target survives as it expires, it will have its cooldown refreshed. If instead the target dies, boom! 5 shards. Shards as a resource are most valuable for destruction out of the 3 specs, at least with the current state of Warlock, and having instantly 5 will save you 12 to 25 incinerates in terms of shard generation, so it's pretty good. The catch is that the targets need to die, so hard to find use on pure single target raid bosses. But if they have adds or multiple add phases, then this could easily become one of the biggest damage gains and definitely one of the strongest in Mythic Plus scenarios. This is a lot of inferring actually. We still need to wait for the actual content to be out and test it before we can be 100% sure, but the theory seems to be pretty strong. Or maybe I'm wrong? Tell me in the comments. A quick disclaimer, there are a bunch of buffs to underused talents that Destruction received so far, which we might not show up on the video. That is reassuring when it comes to giving you more viable builds to play with, but at the end of the day, it all changes in late game when we can do some proper testing, logging and simming. For now, you should probably be glad that the devs are taking this attitude towards balancing things they ignored for years. With that being said, Soulfire has been redesigned from its live iteration. It's a mega cast with a 1-minute cooldown that does decent damage, more than a base Chaos Bolt, double the damage actually, and generates 1 soul shard. It also has the Chaotic Inferno trait baked into it, making the next Incinerate instant, which is actually a big deal. So far, I'm not 100% sure if it's better than the other two, at least in late game, since the other two on paper scale with gear better. We will have to see. Shuttle Burn has been changed as well, with a 12-second cooldown and a 1 shard cost. It deals a chunk of damage with an increased crit when your target is low on health. It restores 1 shard if the target dies within 5 seconds. This seems a bit buggy since it doesn't restore it if you use it as the killing blow. Not sure if it's intended or not. Aside from this, I don't know how to feel about it. With the basic gear template you have, it deals about 50% of a Chaos Bolt damage while costing 50% less. Thing is, Chaos Bolt scales its base damage from crit as well, so eventually it would out DPS Shadow Burn no problem. The discussion starts in execute situations where it gets 50% crit on low health targets, which is what the tooltip says. You could assume low health means below 20%? Chaos Bolt always crits anyway, and its damage will outscale Shadow Burn. This purely talking from a shard cost perspective. That leaves its killing effect to be factored in, meaning it will be good in dungeons if you can time it, and maybe raids with adds. That still is debatable since the killing blow scenario will hardly happen every 12 seconds, in raids at least. So a lot of ifs on this one. Inferno has been buffed to also provide 20% more damage to Rain of Fire. This is probably the most dead talent row, the deadest of the dead. Anything that can buff not picking Cataclysm is a welcome change. Cataclysm is still very strong, but hopefully with more tuning this can actually be a competitive row. Fire and Brimstone feels stronger than Inferno at first glance. When fighting 5 targets, you essentially will generate 1 shard per Incinerate, which is bonkers. This will only have AoE applications and will be incredible in dungeons with heavy packs like Sanguine Deaths or Spirit of Ascension. The 5th utility row has undergone a few changes where now Howl of Terror replaces Demonic Circle. This is essentially an unpruned ability that we lost along the way, and honestly, glad to have it back. Fundamentally fits way better into this row, providing utility where utility is due. Castable AoE Fear, not much to say. It can be amazing in dungeons to disrupt casts and give your tank a few seconds of breathing room to hopefully get pumped back up to full HP. And lastly, the 6th talent row and the biggest changes Destruction has gotten in such a small section of the spec. Roaring Blaze has been redesigned to make Conflagrate increase the fire damage the target gets hit by 30% for 6 seconds. The direction is good, but the talent seems incomplete. It definitely cannot compete with the other, soon to be disclosed, option. There are 2 main ways I see that can be used to buff this one. Either make the buff affect Chaos Bolt as well, which it doesn't at the moment. I would think Chaos damage being both fire and shadow would be affected by fire buffs. Maybe at least 50% extra damage? Maybe it is, and the talent is just buggy. If not, increase your fire damage done to all targets. So instead of it being a debuff on the target, make it a buff for yourself. That way you can do some rains of fire for AoE, Incinerates or Cataclysm and have some small burst. The damage coefficient might need to be nerfed, but it affecting only one target and not working towards Chaos Ball seems counterintuitive and overall very weak. Increase the buff to, I don't know, 60% if it's not going to affect Chaos Ball, because its contender is Reign of Chaos! Oh my Cthulhu! Reign of Chaos replaces the old Grimoire of Supremacy to have the Vision of Perfection mechanic baked into it. The way this works is that every shard consumed during your initial Infernal will give you a 15% chance to summon one additional Infernal. This doesn't scale with multiple Infernals out, just your original one, which is still fairly strong. Don't get me wrong, this is an amazing talent design and would be a major shame to see this nerfed into oblivion, but it definitely is the strongest on the row. The main issue is that it further increases the problem with Destro, where outside cooldowns you are a wet noodle and inside them a god, which is a design choice the devs have tried hard to rectify by buffing multiple spells baseline damage to hit harder outside cooldowns. Grimoire of Sacrifice has had its small buffs as well, but really doesn't feel nearly as impactful as Reign of Chaos. Impressions. Well, after some initial testing, I have a thing or two I want to point out. Impending Catastrophe could have a smart AI to it, in that it can place tongues on creatures that are scripted to cast back-to-back filler casts, and maybe one spell that would usually be kicked, and weakness on all the rest. At least that way, one curse will always be applied correctly, and if anything, you would readjust one or two curses if you really sought that outcome out. This is just a quick suggestion, instead of it being random. Otherwise, make it apply the same curse to all, and the curse could be chosen at random. Although I do see how Mass Curse of Exhaustion can be incredibly overpowered and desired above all other outcomes. I have an issue with the fundamental design direction of the fourth talent row, mostly because I feel Inferno should not be on the same row as both of these. Cataclysm and Brimstone focus on damage, sure, but mostly on shard generation. Brimstone from the cleave and Cata from the immolate ticks it applies with 1 GCD, while Inferno focuses on effectively converting soul shards into AoE damage. The row doesn't make a lot of sense design-wise. Maybe have Inferno replace Soulfire? I can't really put my finger on it, but certain talent rows have been dead for years. I'd rather have to choose between single target and AoE than different types of AoE, where I will just choose the biggest number, which is irrelevant of the spell and how fun it is. Same thing can be said for soul shard generation. I am 100% up for making destruction less reliant on cooldowns, and 1000% up for talent builds being more versatile. I really hope the devs continue to make changes and address stuff, since I can probably speak for you as well when I say I want to use something other than Cataclysm from time to time. Cataclysm has been the de facto option for, what, 2 expansions now? Not a major fan of losing strong fantasies like Grimoire of Make Your Demon Matter More, but if this adds more options to the talents, then go! And go, you should to the Council of Black Harvest Discord. We had our say on destruction from our nerdy perspective, and there's more to be had for you if you check the big boys and what they have to say about the spec. And with that, we thank our patrons for the support and continuous pledges. It really helps us out. We are actually upgrading our studio consistently, giving better and better quality, and with new videos and plans ahead. So thank you very much for supporting us. It's definitely worth it. We appreciate it, although it's not required. And if you are interested in seeing what this is all about, what you can check, click the link down below. You'll reach our Patreon website, maybe our Teespring merch link, which you might find something that you like there, because they're all graphically designed and drawn by Marcelian. I'm not Marcelian. What's my value? I'm just a pretty face. Thank you for watching the video. I'll see you next time.